All right, we're going to read chapter 5 of The Girl Who Could Fly. I got Skittles here, and Snickers is behind her right here. They love story time. Piper, there are others like you, and a place where you will belong. Dr. Hellion spoke quietly, and Piper leaned forward to drink in every single word. No fooling? True to her word, Dr. Hellion had seen to it that Piper didn't get into any trouble once she landed. Afterward, Dr. Hellion went into the house with Betty and Joe and stayed there for a long time before calling Piper in to speak with her privately. In no time at all, Piper felt like Dr. Hellion was an old trusted friend. The only trouble with flying is that it gets lonely up in the sky when you're the only one, she told Dr. Hellion confidently. I was thinking that maybe I could teach others to fly and then everyone could do it. I mean, it's not so hard once you get the hang of it. Once she got started talking about flying, Piper couldn't stop. Dr. Hellion listened carefully to every single word. Is that what you'd like? More than anything. That and learning to fly better, 'cause I want to fly clear around the world. Piper's face lit up at the thought of it. Then I can see everything, and maybe there are other flyers out there that no one knows nothing about. Maybe I could find them, or at least meet a lot of interesting people in far off places. Sounds like you have it all figured out, Piper shrugged. It seems to me that it don't hurt none to get yourself a dream and a plan, 'cause if you don't, then you'll never go nowhere. I couldn't agree more. Well, Piper, it's good that you've told me all of this because your mother and father and I have just been sitting here discussing your future, and I suggested to them that it might be in your interest to come with me for a while. With you? Where? My institute. It specializes in assisting special needs children like yourself in learning skills so that they can fulfill their dreams. You mean I'd get to go to school? Like I was telling your parents, we'll teach you everything you need to know. I'd sure like to fly better. Piper couldn't wait to get some good flying lessons. There's also one other thing you should know, Piper. What happened to you this morning in your room, that voice you heard? Well, I don't want to go into too much detail, and I certainly don't want to scare you, but unless you have protection, there are those out there who have an interest in getting to you. Unfortunately, they have great means at their disposal. At the Institute, we can see to it that you're safe. A shiver went up and down Piper's spine. Why would they want to get at me? It's very complicated, and frankly, it's not something I'd like you to worry about. When I spoke with your parents, they told me that the final decision to go to the Institute or not would be left up to you. Based on your circumstances, I think it would be a wise decision on your part. Without hesitation, indeed without even thinking, Piper wholeheartedly agreed with Dr. Hellion, who happily got to her feet. So it's settled. Like a whirlwind, Piper rushed up to her room to tell Betty, who was in the middle of pulling clothes out of Piper's drawers. Dr. Hellion says she'll teach me everything that I need to know, Ma. Ain't that great? Piper blurted out. And I'm going to go to her institute. I figured as much, Betty nodded, and Piper suddenly noticed an unmistakable look of great concern on her mother's careworn face. Betty and Joe were simple country folks, at their wits' end. They loved their child with all their hearts, and didn't want her going away for even 1 second. All the same, protecting Piper from the likes of what had happened earlier that morning was now a heavy consideration. Dr. Hellion promised to keep their Piper out of harm's way. She also patiently pointed out that Piper's special needs required an individually crafted learning program specifically designed for her abilities. Had the McLeods given any thought to how they were going to address that? No? Well, Dr. Hellion was an expert with exceptional children. Her facility was great for just such occurrences and would gather any resources necessary to see to it that Piper had all she needed. No expense would be spared. While it was true that the McLeods were sticklers for their routine, they were not unkind people. They would have cut off their right arms before unknowingly hurting Piper in any way. And so, with the greatest reluctance and against their best instincts, they were letting their only child be taken from them. Betty had already packed Piper's warmest sweater, woolen gloves, and socks. Everything Piper owned was all neatly arranged in an old carpet bag that was light to carry, even to Piper's arms. Seeing her clothes all packed up jolted Piper out of her euphoria and stopped her short in her tracks. Ma, what are you doing with all my clothes? Fancy institute or not, I'm figuring you'll need a stitch or two to cover yourself with. Betty pushed Piper's long underwear into the bag. But, Piper didn't understand. Why are you packing them all up? You'll have to leave with Dr. Hellion, and you won't be able to live here anymore. What? Piper's confusion grew. But that ain't right. Why can't I walk to the Institute like I see them Miller youngins walk to school every day? It didn't occur to Piper that it would ever be otherwise. Dr. Hellion's Institute is real far away, Piper. Too far to walk to and too far to come home from, even on holidays. All at once, Piper came to realize that there were greater implications to what had seemed like a common sense decision. She sank down in her bed. No. Now, child. Don't get yourself into a state. Like you says, Dr. Hellion's got everything all figured out. Piper noticed that her mother's hands were shaking as she folded the only handkerchief the McLeods had ever owned. Made with a delicate linen and embroidered with tiny bluebirds, the handkerchief had been carefully passed down through the generations. Betty had only ever used it once, and that was on her wedding day. Neatly folding it and placing it in the old bag, Betty was now quietly bestowing it on Piper. The simple gesture woke Piper up to the finality of leaving her parents at the farm. But I didn't know, Piper wrung her hands. What was she going to do now? She wanted to go to Dr. Hellion's Institute, but not if it meant leaving her home and her ma and her pa. Suddenly, a simple decision had become very complicated, and Piper couldn't figure out her way to an answer that didn't include disappointment and regret. How had she gotten herself into such a muddle? You'll be safe, and they'll give you special schooling. Betty could see Piper's mounting concern and tried to reassure her. You'll get to meet other young'uns, maybe make some friends. Piper shook her head. I don't reckon I'll go now. Betty sniffed, turned away quickly, and gathered up a hairbrush. Ain't nothing in this life comes easy to any of us, child. Every road you walk down's got a price. Sooner you learn that, the better. Don't matter the direction you go, there'll be some bad mixed in with the good, and you just gotta learn to take the one with the other. Winding Piper's Sunday hair ribbon around the brush's handle, Betty tucked them in a bag and closed it with finality. You done went and chose your path, and there ain't nothing your pa and I can do about it now. At first, Piper didn't notice what her ma was angling at, and then, at once, things snapped into focus in such a way that they did make sense. Betty had told her not to fly. She warned her to keep her feet on the ground, and Piper hadn't paid her any mind. Sure as anything, she'd gone and caught that baseball, and everyone saw. The whole situation was out of her ma and pa's hands, like a detective unraveling a case. Piper traced the steps she had taken to arrive at this moment. Leaving with Dr. Hellion was only the latest ramification of the choice she'd made to jump off the roof while lying on the tree branch that day. There wasn't anything she or her ma or pa could do about it now. It was Piper and Piper alone who had brought all this about. I didn't never think this was going to happen, Piper breathed quietly, shaking her head in wonder. Betty handed Piper the carpet bag. Mind your manners now. I will, Ma. See to it that you clean the place. Betty sniffed, turning away quickly and roughly pushing the back of her hand against her cheek. Best be getting a move on. Don't want to keep all them folks waiting on us. She left Piper's room abruptly and bustled down the stairs. Piper took one last look around the only bedroom she'd ever known before picking up the old bag and reluctantly leaving. When she opened the porch door, she noticed that the fancy cars were packed up and the men in dark suits were waiting next to them at the ready. Dr. Hellion smiled when she saw her. All ready? Piper nodded sadly. Off to the side, Joe stood forlornly waiting. I'm going now, Pa. Joe sighed, thrusting his hand into the pocket of his overalls and pulling out a beautifully carved wooden bird. He handed it to Piper and she took it gently, turning it over reverently. It was going to be for your birthday, Joe spoke slowly. I expect now's as good a time as any. Made it myself. Tears sprang into Piper's eyes. It's beautiful, Pa, most beautiful I ever saw. Piper's fingers traced the delicate lines on the feathers of the bird that Joe had painstakingly spent hours creating. It was truly a labor of love. We'll be waiting right here for you. When you're ready to come back to us. Joe patted Piper's shoulder awkwardly. He wasn't used to so much talking. Piper nodded through her tears. She felt Dr. Hellion's gentle hand on her shoulder and allowed herself to be guided away. Agent lifted her up into the helicopter and expertly fastened safety straps across her chest, which firmly held her against the soft leather seats. The next thing she knew, The door was closed and the engine was revving up. It was all happening so fast. The helicopter lifted off, and Piper watched the strong wind created by the blades blasting against her ma and pa. They stood stalwart against it and waved as the helicopter rose into the sky. Piper kept her eyes fixed, not on the sky, but on the waving hands of her parents. Although she knew that they couldn't see, she waved back. Long after all the fancy cars had sped away and the dust had settled, Betty and Joe McLeod kept their eyes fixed firmly on the horizon where they'd last seen the helicopter. Neither of them moved for a long time. That's where the next chapter begins, so I'm going to pause there.